Donald Trump flipping the script on his criminal hush money trial in New York, going from the court to a bodega. If that place looked familiar, well, that's because you've seen it before. It's the infamous site where its previous owner, Jose Alba, stabbed a man to death in self-defense, but was charged by a New York City DA named Alvin Bragg, who's very familiar to you now. But then finally, under a lot of pressure, Alvin Bragg dropped the case. The former president railing against Bragg's crime record on tape. Watch here.
They want law and order. They have a lot of crime, tremendous crime, where their stores are being robbed. We have to straighten out New York, and that includes crime. And these guys have great people, great friends, but they have tremendous crimes. It's Alvin Bragg's fault. Alvin Bragg does nothing. He goes after guys like Trump, who did nothing wrong. Violent criminals, murderers. They know there are hundreds of murderers all over the city. They know who they are. They don't pick them up. They go after Trump.
Well, Trump must have gotten under Alvin Bragg's skin. The Manhattan DA issuing a response defending his handling of the case and adding that his, quote, top priority remains combating violent crime. And the office has worked hand in hand with the NYPD to drive down overall crime in Manhattan, including double-digit decreases in homicides and shootings since he took office. That, however, still doesn't change the fact that Bragg has downgraded a staggering 60% of felony cases to lesser charges last year. Meanwhile, Trump got a very warm reception at that bodega. But the media, not a fan. One MSNBC analyst comparing the former president to a caged animal, warning that he might lash out dangerously because of the trial.
Essentially, he's like a caged animal, and that's a dangerous situation. He's feeling very threatened. He's out of control, and so we do expect him to lash out. Anybody who has covered him over the past decade can expect that.
Judge, you got a kick out of that one.
I did. Out of control. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Out of control. I mean, in their dreams, he's out of control. This man is the epitome of grace under fire. I mean, forget about the fact that he was spied on. He was impeached twice. They took $500 million from him. They've indicted him 4 times. They're looking to put him in jail. This guy's out campaigning as soon as court is out. And, you know, this guy, Bragg, I got to tell you, he is a make-believe prosecutor. This guy's job is to protect the criminal and forget about the victim. Alvin Bragg is the kind of guy who forgives those who rob people with weapons, but then indicts people who defend themselves with weapons. This guy is a pathetic example of what's going on. And he can talk about crime being down in New York, Alvin Bragg, all he wants. He's a fool. First of all, police aren't making arrests because there aren't enough of them. Secondly, people aren't reporting crimes because they know that nothing's going to happen. And the idea, and I can speak to this, the idea of downgrading 938 of the most serious felony charges and reducing felonies to misdemeanors in almost 1,000 cases, 60% reduced. I mean, this is sad. This is pathetic. But I do think that it was brilliant on the part of Donald Trump to go back to the bodega, because this is a place where an ex-con, a career criminal, jumped over the counter of the owner of this bodega to stab him because the owner of the bodega wouldn't give his girlfriend a free bag of chips. Yep. And while the ex-con's girlfriend is stabbing the owner, he is cornered, he is being attacked, and he's about to be stabbed, and he defends himself. And this bozo, Alvin Bragg, says after a thorough investigation, we dismissed $250,000 bail in Rikers Island for 3 weeks only because we went crazy, the media went crazy, the public went crazy, and the poor owner, he went back to the Dominican Republic. So, you know, Alvin Bragg is going to say, you know, I'm a great DA because I'm going to convict Trump. Well, if you don't, you're a fool. It's 90% Democrats and blue in this city, including the jury pool.
What do you think about that campaign tactic, Harold?
First of all, it's good to be back. I've been gone a week, so it's good to see everybody around the table. It's always
good to see you, man. You were missed, yeah.
Couple things. First, when you think about Donald Trump as a candidate for office and as a political athlete, I say often he's as gifted a political athlete as I've ever seen. I don't agree with a lot of his things, but you have to respect the business and understand how politics is, the art of politics is litigated. This move here, Dana, we had a conversation about this a day or so ago. Here he is in New York. He goes to a bodega. He was at, I think, at a gas station a day or so before. This is as good a campaigning as you can do. Now, whether some may argue or say that the crowd was scripted, whatever happened there, it looked good. This is the kind of theater you want when you're in a campaign. And he was able to highlight, in addition to that, an issue that is on the forefront of a lot of voters' minds, not just in New York, but everywhere: law and order and crime. I'll refrain from some of the conversation and the analysis around D.A. Bragg. But if you look at what, to the judge's point, this juxtaposition of Donald Trump there versus the trial, this is what's going to be talked about over the next day or so. So as a political move, as a political athlete, this was a very, very smart thing for the president to do. Now, I don't think it's going to necessarily have an impact on the trial itself, but on the campaign itself, there's no doubt this is one of the smarter things the president could be doing.
And the image drove the news. And President Biden is in Pennsylvania. He's swinging through there, kind of, right? He's talking about raising taxes and things like that. And I think that they know that it's the keystone state to his campaign. They need to have Pennsylvania in the Democratic camp. But how does the Biden team compete with images like that?
He can't. Trump's like the white Carl Lewis. If we're talking political athleticism,
yeah, the white Carl Lewis.
Think about how fast this guy is.
White guy faster than the black Carl Lewis?
They call him White Lightning.
White Lightning, okay.
He's at a fraternity house throwing footballs. Then he's at a UFC fight with Rogan. And then he's at a Chick-fil-A. Black women are coming up to him, hugging him, shakes on the house. And then he's going to the Bodega where Hispanic kids are chanting 4 more years. Yep. It blows up every hoax they've thrown at him. They've said this guy hates minorities. The minorities love him everywhere he goes. Yep. Say he's afraid to go out inside of his bunker. He's going to places Joe Biden doesn't even go. This is a brilliant tactic. And if you're going to be pinned down in a place like this, he pivots and takes opportunities like that. It was sick. Sleepy Don one day, and the next day he's a caged animal. They're just throwing stuff up against the wall. I think he's been pretty calm for facing 91 charges. I'm wetting myself if I'm facing one charge. They are trying to rig this jury. They are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge. They're saying, oh, have you ever said anything on social media about Donald Trump? No, I can't remember. Well, what about this post where you said he should be in prison? Oh, yeah, that one. Strike. And they keep throwing these undercovers at him, and thank God they're doing their research on these people. So far, the jury foreman is a guy born in Ireland, and then my other hope is a guy born in Puerto Rico with grandkids. The rest of them are corporate lawyers with DEI all over their firm's websites, and you have a 20-year-old white girl who works for Disney and likes to dance. This looks like trouble. I think
exactly
a hung jury.
I
think a hung jury is the best you're going to get here.
Listen, hashtag White Lightning. Normally, when someone's in court or in trouble, the rule is always shut up and just win your case. Going out to the public is usually a bad idea. This is the one time it's a great idea. I think President Trump and his team is smart enough to know that whatever happens in the courtroom is already laid out. They know what's going on. So he's going to use this. His trial is going to be publicly. So he's doing things that the other president won't do, can't do. You can't have Joe show up at a bodega and answer questions because it'll get weird, you know. So what the president is doing is phenomenal in the sense where I think he's read the room. He's not going to get a fair trial in New York, but for all those days he's there, he's got free campaign money. So he's making up for that loss. They took $500 million away. Cool. I'll take the free press, which normally would cost candidates millions and millions of dollars. He's getting it every day. And as a former wrestler, he is a master at the promo. He needs to have a book called The Art of the Promo. He gets in front of the mic and he just drops it. The crowd's chanting. You can't manufacture that. You didn't hand out scripts for that because if so, they would see it online right now. Everyone would have a thing of it. So what he's doing is we're seeing in real time a living martyr because he's dead in the courtroom, but his trials is in the public, and he's winning the public. Can
I ask you guys a question? Why do I'm gonna sit and listen to the facts? You think that? So you think the jury has already decided? So I differ with you there. I
just think the case in itself. First of all, it's a federal. Why is Bragg doing it anyways? But the other side of it is it's designed for him to lose when you look at, because no one else is getting charged with this. No one. Like, it's crazy. The statute of limitations are out. It should have been a done deal. They found a way, like I said. So the one time, he said witch trial probably 50 times. This is the one time where it feels like a witch trial to the regular, I didn't pass the bar guy. But to me,
neither did I. But that might be true what you're saying. But you still have to present the case, and the jury may reach the same conclusion.
There's no such thing as a fair trial. When Manhattan is 90% Democrat, the defendant is a politician running for president.
I disagree with you.
There should have been a change of venue in a county close to Manhattan where the same judge would try the case, but where at least they had a 50-50 like in a swing district. New York City was selected
You're
for
saying
this
every
reason.
Republican that's been convicted in the city of New York, they should have known they were going to be convicted because they're Democrats on the jury?
No, because there's a 90. No, what I'm saying is that if the jury pool is pulled from the voting rolls and they're 90% anti-Trump 4 years ago, let's stop kidding each other and making believe this is a fair trial. The only way he gets a fair trial as a politician in a political case, in a political venue, is in a swing state or a swing county venue.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.